reality. It gets really freaky when you get to that kind of level of research. And then that's why, they call them mad scientists, because how do you take what you see in the lab and what you study and you try and share that with the people on the street? They're going to think you're goofy, no matter how you try and put it. And I must remind you that, many people are, not common folk out, in the world think that science has got it all figured out. It's not true. Science has got nothing figured out. If you speak to any scientist worth their salt, they'll tell you right off the bat, 90 to 95% of science is unexplained. We don't understand it. We observe it, but we don't understand it. And just because we can observe it doesn't mean we know what the hell is going on. So next time somebody tells you, oh, they got it all figured out, they don't. And I've got it, from some very senior scientists in South Africa specifically that told me exactly what they observe in their laboratory. And that the other thing that shocked me is that when this was a professor at the University of Port Elizabeth that told me that 90% or more of the stuff they observe in their lab, they don't understand. And I said, well, can I come and sit in your lab and make notes of the stuff you don't understand? And he said, no, we can't. We're not allowed to note it or report on it until we understand it. That's a big pity. The ancients were primitive. This is how ancient civilizations are shown to us. And this is what we believe they did. I better speed up here by the looks of things. And it's these ancient primitive guys that did stuff like this, right? Because they were bored. And then we get told, if you watch History Channel, apparently they built this because they needed to know where the sun came up. That's what they tell us on History Channel. I can think of many ways, much easier ways to figure out, stick a few sticks in the ground and figure out where the sun comes up. And then when they were bored with building circles like this, they built big statues like this. And apparently also, this one tells us where east is, so it was probably obviously built to face east, so we know where east was just in case they forgot. And when they were tired of building statues, they built stuff like this, platforms, giant platforms out of big stone. We don't know why they needed platforms in those days, but they built them in any case, just in case they had to find a use for a platform at some stage. Let's build a platform, come on, we've got nothing better to do. Cruising around the veld, avoiding snakes. Hey, let's build a platform. That's what our history books tend to suggest. And then they got into stuff like this. And this is really when you watch the poor guys on Discovery Channel trying to imitate how they built this, you just realize how pathetic it is. We don't know how they did this. We got no bloody idea until you start embracing the thought or the concept of frequency manipulation and sound manipulation. Suddenly this all becomes an absolute reality. And you realize we're dealing with something very special and very unique. And then they obviously built stuff like this. Well, Carmen Bolter, as I mentioned earlier, her wonderful documentary, Pyramid Code, she shows in there that the pyramids were nothing else but the generation of energy. And she shows you beautifully that these were giant energy devices. And if you think that after years and years of abuse, of being gutted and destroyed, they have lost their energy fields, you'd be mistaken. Here's an amazing photograph taken with a special lens that shows you that there's still some weird electromagnetic fields that come out of there. Incidentally, we will be doing this kind of photography with special lenses at Adam's Calendar and some of the many stone circles in Watervalboven very shortly. So something strange is still going on, and I'll be talking more in great detail about these energies and frequencies tomorrow. Mythology. The word mythology is completely misused and misunderstood in today's society. The original word mythos comes from Greek once again, and it did not mean imaginary, fairy tale, or anything of that nature. It actually meant words, written words, stories and legends, historic events that were sworn to be accurate and true by priests and kings. So it was an affidavit of an accurate account in history. So it actually means completely the opposite to the value that we ascribe to it today. So from now on, every time you read the word mythology, you've got to ascribe the correct value to it and just replace it with the word history, not imaginary. And suddenly our entire human history changes dramatically. Suddenly there are all these gods coming down from the sky, doing all these wonderful things with flying machines and could do all kinds of things. And you start realizing the difference between gods with a small g and God with a big G. And very quickly, the two start to separate and the twain shall never meet. For decades, scholars have been talking about the origins of humankind at the tip of southern Africa. I'm going to speed up here because I'm going to run out of time. Where is the cradle of humankind? Well, it started a few decades ago, and it was somewhere up there, and then it moved further down there, and it came down there, and then it came down there, and then it was down here somewhere, and then just recently, even in the last week, there's brand new genetic information that was put out that the cradle of humankind is none other, nowhere else than right in the south of Africa. Southern Africa is where the cradle of humankind is. And the widest genetic diversity comes from Southern Africa, and therefore there can be no question that the origins of humankind comes from Southern Africa and nowhere else. And this is very important to support the findings that we're making in the ancient ruins and civilizations here. Mitochondrial Eve studies have been suggesting this over and over again, talking about, 300,000 years ago, humankind suddenly popped out of nowhere, right? But then we take people to Sterkfontein caves and we lie to them. We say to them, look, this is the cradle of humankind, and we show them Mrs. Pless, and we show them Littlefoot, and they get very excited, but at the same time they get very confused because these have nothing to do with Homo sapiens. These are little cretins called Australopithecus, and there is no scientific conclusion or consensus that we evolved out of these little cretins. But when they take you to the cradle of humankind, they make you believe that, and they suggest that we evolved out of these cretins. So it's a complete misnomer. It should be called the cradle of hominid kind and not the cradle of humankind. And you'll see very quickly that the cradle of humankind, thank you, the cradle of humankind is all over in Southern Africa, but it's just completely been overlooked and misunderstood. The most ancient written record in human history, as we know, the first civilization, the Sumerians, they wrote and wrote and wrote like they were besieged by the devil. They wrote down everything they could. And when you read the thousands and thousands of pages on Oxford University website, they treat every translation, and this is my take on it, go and do your own research. They treat all the translations of the Sumerian tablets as a work of fiction. I'm not kidding you. Just put that into perspective, people. The first people on earth that found the art of writing, the first thing they do is they sit down and they write millions of clay tablets full of crap. How is that possible? Do me a favor. I did a lot of work on literacy, teaching children how to read. And I can see at least one person in this auditorium that worked on that project with me. I know what it's like when a grade 1 child can hardly read and they get words wrong and they get the meanings of words wrong. When I read those translations on Oxford University website, I can see exactly how they're getting things wrong. It's like watching grade 1s that have just learned how to read, trying to explain big words that they don't understand, get the meanings wrong. It's quite spectacular. Just go and look at that for yourselves. All the greatest stories in the Bible originally come from the Sumerian tablets, every single one of them. The important definitions, the Holy Trinity, first comes to us from the Sumerians, Anu, Enlil, and Enki. When the Bible refers to the giants, the Anakim, it's probably, I believe, the same group that the Sumerian tablets refer to, Anunnaki, Anakim, Anunnaki. Elohim, we meet the Elohim, the biblical God. The gods of the Bible, the Elohim is a plural, it's never a singular. So every time you read the word God in the Bible, you've got to replace it with the gods. That's its original meaning. Don't get confused by it. Then we meet Allah, that's a derivative of Elohim, so it's also a plural. Then in Genesis 6, we meet those naughty Nephilim, or the sons of the gods that came down from the heavens, and they saw the beautiful daughters of man, and they married as many as they wanted and had children with them. This is some very interesting stuff that we read in the Bible that never really gets explained until you start understanding the Sumerian translations. But this is all a work of fiction, right? All of the above is there because of the obsession with gold. The Sumerian tablets, great source of information. On the left, just to show you how some of these cross-reference each other, on the left, these are two examples of several so-called Sumerian kings lists. On the left is this kings list that tells us the names of 8 kings who ruled for a period of 212,000 years before the flood. On the right is this Sumerian kings list that tells us the names of about 134 kings or more, because it's damaged. And it tells us the names of at least 10 kings, 10 of those kings that ruled for a period of 224,000 years before the flood. So you got to ask yourself, there's some interesting corroboration, but it's very important that they both refer to this event called the flood. And pretty much all ancient cultures and civilizations have this flood event in their oral traditions. In the olden times, the gods came to earth and created the earthlings. In the prior times, none of the gods was on earth, nor were the earthlings yet fashioned. In the prior times, the abode of the gods was their own planet. Nibiru is its name. Make of this translation what you want, a work of fiction or real translations, real information. And let us create a Lulu, a primitive worker, the hardship work to take over. Let the being the toil of the Anunnaki carry on his back. Once again, make of that what you want. And we get introduced to the Lord Enki, the Sumerian creator deity, and we get introduced to his symbol, which today, those that study medicine will know, is still used by the medical fraternity as a symbol of modern medicine, one of the oldest symbols on planet Earth. And that is encoded with so much knowledge and information, we can spend an entire lecture on that alone. The work in the Abzu is very important. Abzu has been given many meanings, but one of the primary meanings in the Sumerian tablets is that's where the gold came from. So if we can find where the gold came from, then we can reverse engineer it and say, well, this must be the Abzu. And you'll see that the gold came from nowhere else but right here in southern Africa. And it's still coming from here, isn't it? Zulu creation agrees with all the stuff. In fact, all of African mythology, let me rephrase that. Most of African mythology and most of African historic accounts speak about the same things. The sky gods that came down, in Zulu, it's the Abalungu that came down from the sky. They created the people to do what? To mine gold. This is not new to the Zulu knowledge keepers. The Zulu people of the sky, that's the meaning, or something along those lines. The Abalungu, the pale sky gods, the same aspects given to the Anunnaki by the Sumerian tablets. And if you think Enki is only a Sumerian entity, no way. In Zulu, he's known as Enkai. Suddenly, Sumerian entity becomes a Zulu entity at the same time, and we have a very interesting crossover. And then Solomon is not just a Solomon in the Bible, but in Zulu tradition, he's known as Shalumi, a rich African king that had all the gold mines. And we have to start questioning what's going on here. Was Solomon really who we think he was? Or was it actually someone else in another part of the world that was doing all kinds of stuff all over the world? It gets really interesting. And then that elusive word, Abantu. Nobody seems to know what the origin of Abantu is. Well, Credo Mutwa tells me very bluntly, the word Abantu comes from Abantu, the children of Antu. Who was Antu? The Sumerian goddess who loved the Abzu, where the gold came from. The children of Antu, Abantu. That's Credo Mutwa's words. Over 600 African mythologies speak about the same or very similar kind of set of events and the origins of humankind. Our current belief system that Southern Africa was a sparsely populated continent with very few inhabitants about 1,000 years ago and very, very few prior to that. Well, fortunately, the ancient stone ruins of Southern Africa tell a completely different tale. And many of these stones that would be called cattle kraal or, just kraal or something to the stone enclosures have done a great amount of damage because it's been described from a complete position of ignorance, because there are many thousands of these. I'll show you just a few of them. First thing you realize that all of them are circular. Some of them are complex, some of them are very simple. And you can see from some of these aerial photographs that we're dealing with huge amounts of sedimentation. And you'll see that each one of them is completely unique. And that little bit of information is crucial to this expose, that each one of these stone circles is completely unique. Some of them have very complex internal structures. Some of them have simple internal structures. And then suddenly you start seeing the spider's web effect that comes out of the central circle and many times covers the whole mountain or the whole hill, interspaced with many other things. As you see more simple structures than very complex structures. And you'll note that they're all connected by these ancient roads or channels. There was actually a channel right between there connecting those two. You can't see it anymore. And you realize that we're dealing with something very unusual. Look at that horseshoe shape over there with a perfect circle in the middle. When you're on the ground, you don't realize that that is there. You can only see this from the air. Most of these are pretty much flat with the ground. See all the stuff around it there? Don't worry about this. That's the obvious stuff. But the stuff around it, that's the stuff that interests me, because that's covered by soil. The nice figure of 8 there, and a nice horseshoe in the middle of a much larger circle, and we start seeing these amazing anomalies. Look at all the stuff in between.